Hello, dear Margaret. I'm so happy and honored to see you and have you here.
Thank you, Melly.
So, as we spoke a few weeks ago when we scheduled this interview, I'm launching my program that's called Tu Conexión Interior by the end of October, and it's my second edition. It's specifically based on inner bonding and integrating a little bit about my journey, of course. So I was really willing to hear your voice and to have your perspective and to share. I'm in Argentina, you're in Denver, Colorado. So I really was willing to hear from you, like a little bit of who you are and to keep on learning about you because every time I listen to you, like new pieces come up. And also, what's inner bonding for you, and how is it that you co-created it together with Erica Topic? You know,
Okay, so what would you like me to address first?
um, if you would like to introduce yourself first, that would be great for me.
Okay, so I'm Dr. Margaret Paul, and I am the co-creator of Inner Bonding with Dr. Erica Chopich. And Inner Bonding next year will be 40 years old. It's been 40 years that we have been doing this, and I've been working with people for 54 years. I worked with traditional psychotherapy for 17 years and was not happy with the results. And so I started to pray for a teacher or a process. And that's when I met Erica, and she had half the process and I had half the process. And our spiritual guidance helped us put it all together into this really, really powerful process that I've been practicing ever since then, and it's been completely life-changing for me. So I'm always excited to share it. And,
Yeah,
and I've got 12 published books. Some of them are in Spanish, so if people want to read them in Spanish, they are available. They can go to our website, innerbonding.com, and click on books and scroll down to see the books in foreign languages.
great. Yes, you have Healing Your Alones. That was it. It was the first book that I read in 2009.
Yeah.
So, what would you say about like what's inner bonding for you? This life-changing process that changed so many lives, and it's also changing my life too. Uh, what
Yeah,
would
inner bonding for me is, it's such a powerful 6-step healing process that anybody can learn. And it enables us to heal the false beliefs that so many of us have. We have dozens and dozens of false beliefs that we've absorbed from parents and teachers and siblings and religious leaders and the media as we were growing up, and beliefs we just absorbed from our experiences that may be subconscious or unconscious. And inner bonding helps us become aware of them and helps us to understand the fears that come from them and how that can create so much of the pain, the anxiety and depression and guilt and shame and anger and aloneness and emptiness and jealousy and resentment. So many of these feelings come from how we treat ourselves, coming from our false beliefs. Inner bonding enables us to become aware of that, become aware of what's subconscious or unconscious, become aware of the effect that that has on us, on our health and physical health, emotional health, our well-being. And it helps us to develop what we call the loving adult, which is the part of us that can learn to love ourselves rather than abandon ourselves. It helps us become aware of how we are abandoning ourselves, and it helps us to develop our spiritual connection so that we can turn to a higher source of love and of truth. And we can turn to this source for helping to heal the false beliefs and for what would be loving to us. So many of us didn't have good role models for what it looks like to love ourselves. And inner bonding teaches us how to access that information moment by moment. It's not like it's a cookie cutter thing. It's like any given moment, we learn to access the information if we're open to learning about what's loving to ourselves. And inner bonding is based on the concept that there's only two intentions at any given moment. And one is the intention to learn about loving ourselves and sharing our love with others. And the other is the intention to protect against our painful feelings, against getting hurt with various forms of controlling, self-abandoning behavior. And that's what most of us learned. We learn to control in various ways to try and feel safe. And we learn to abandon ourselves in many ways as forms of control. But it doesn't work well. It brings about a lot of pain. And so inner bonding is just an amazing process for healing on all these levels, physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Great. You introduced the parts, the intention. And I was wondering, like, it happened to me in my process, and it happens also today and in my with my clients too, that I see that standing on the loving adult and really is a real challenge sometimes, because we have like wounded selves that are really strong, and we stand on our ego minds, or we're in the river. So I was wondering, what would you say about like the journey of strengthening the loving adult?
Yeah, so like learning anything that's worth learning takes practice, and developing a loving adult takes practice. We have all developed our wounded self. We had to do that as part of our survival. And that's where all the fear and false beliefs are. It's actually in the lower left part of the brain and the fight or flight mechanism, which is where all this fear and all these false beliefs are. And as we practice inner bonding, and we become aware of how we're treating ourselves, how we're hurting ourselves, and we're willing to open to learning with our higher self or higher guidance, whatever that is for a person, we gradually develop new neural pathways for the loving adult. The more we take loving action for ourselves, the more we develop the new neural pathways for ourselves, and learn to take loving care of what we call in inner bonding the inner child. And the inner child is who we really are in our true soul self, our divine soul, which is a spark of love within us, and is this like multifaceted diamond. And many people don't know anything about their core self, their soul self, their inner child. And so that part of us kind of gets buried because we end up thinking that we are our wounded self. But our wounded self is who we created as part of our survival. But our soul is who we really are, that spark of the divine. And in inner bonding, by practicing the 6 steps, we get to know how incredible we are in our own soul through our higher guidance. And as we do that, we're developing the loving adult. And the more we practice and develop these new neural pathways for the loving adult, and the more we get to know who we are, the easier it becomes to see who everybody is in their soul, not just to see them in their wounded self, which nobody likes anybody's wounded self, but to see who we really are in our soul. And for me, this is what can eventually bring about world peace, because if we're really loving and valuing ourselves, filling ourselves up with love, we want to share that love. And the more we share our love and the more we get to see who people are in their essence, the more we develop our loving adult. We just can't hurt others from that place. We hurt others from our wounded self and from the fears and false beliefs of our wounded self. But we don't hurt others from our loving adult. We don't hurt animals. We don't hurt the planet from our loving adult. And so, obviously, if more people were practicing inner bonding and developing their loving adult, which we do over a lifetime, it's not like it just happens and we're done. We do it over a lifetime. But the more we're doing this, the kinder and more loving our world would become.
Thank you, Margaret. And, you know, like I was listening to you, and this, like I've been experiencing this sensation of becoming, taking the daily steps and the daily courage to be the loving adult and to bring love and joy and to my life. And I've heard from you saying like, my life is pure joy when I'm being who I am, you know, like I'm bringing spirit, and I'm really starting to experience it. And sometimes like I used to have like a strong wounded self, like I still get like hijacked because I'm a human being. I'm here, like I'm learning day by day and opening to learning. But I was really curious that it happens with my clients sometimes as well, that they really get their intention, you know, to be love as a priority, but sometimes they get caught with the wounded self because they are like completely straight, like looking for the results, you know, like, and maybe say the universe, my guidance is not helping me, like I'm doing everything. And what would you say about this?
No, the wounded self is the part of us that wants to control. That's what it's about. It's about control. It's about trying to have control over feeling safe. And so lots of times people think they're open, but they really have an agenda. See, for me, being open to learning is about evolving in our ability to love. That's why we're here. That's why we came to the planet, to evolve in our ability to love and to manifest the gifts that we've been given on the planet, to share those with each other. But the wounded self doesn't understand learning to love for the sake of being more loving. The wounded self has an agenda. Oh, I'll become more loving so that I will make more money, or so that I'll be able to manifest, so that I'll meet my partner, so that I'll get pregnant, or so that I'll, whatever the attachment is to the outcome. The wounded self always has an attachment to an outcome. And that's what gets in the way of connecting with spirit. Um, Spirit exists at a higher frequency than we operate at. We operate at the frequency we do so we can see each other. If we operated like spirit or like a hummingbird's wings, it's going so fast you can't even see them, we wouldn't be able to see each other. And so our frequency is lower than that of spirit. In order to connect with spirit, we have to be able to raise our frequency. And there's two major things we need to do. One is we need to keep our body clean and healthy. We need to not be eating, the modern junk foods full of sugar and over processed and full of chemicals, and not to be eating that. We need to be eating the way people ate hundreds of years ago, where the food wasn't so contaminated, because the processed food and all the sugar and everything, it brings the frequency down in the body. It's hard for the body to deal with those. They're not natural to the body. And so anything that's hard for the body will bring the frequency down. And so it just makes it that much harder to connect with your guidance. And the other thing that raises the frequency is a true intention to learn about loving with no agenda attached. And that's the thing that makes it hard for people. Well, I'm doing the process and I'm asking, I'm not getting any answers. Like I said, it's because they have an agenda attached. They're not really about loving for the sake of evolving the soul in our ability to love. And so when people really, truly take loving care of their body and they're truly open to learning, they're going to find themselves being able to connect to guidance. Now, guidance is not loud most of the time. It's pretty subtle, and it'll come through with words popping into your mind. It'll come through with images, pictures, feelings, many ways that guidance comes through. And so you have to be very present in order to experience the truth and the guidance that our guidance has for us. The wounded self is not present. the wounded self operates in the past and in the future. It takes the past, it projects it onto the future. And it goes, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Or, we better do this, or this is going to happen. And it predicts the future, but it knows nothing about it. The wounded self is actually a programmed part of us, and it is ignorant. It has no access to truth whatsoever. And yet that's where I was when I started to do inner bonding. That's where most of us are when we start to do a healing process. But like you've seen, Meli, when you're really open to learning without an agenda, you start to be able to connect with your guidance. And that makes such a huge difference in life, to know that we're not alone, that we're being looked out for, that true safety is not from the wounded self. True safety is in being connected with your guidance, because your guidance has a broad perspective of what's happening and can help keep you safe. It has saved my life numbers of times by letting me know ahead of time of something that I need to do or something I need to avoid. And it's kept me healthy all these years. It guided me into what's good for my body. Because, at this point, I think, I'm 85 years old and I'm very healthy. I've got a ton of energy and I'm really productive and I've got no cognitive deficit at all. My guidance guided me in all of that. And so, it's just a completely different way to live, is to be in touch with your higher guidance who watches over you and lets you know what's really in your highest good. I just can't imagine living any other way right now.
Yeah. What's on my highest good? That's a great question to bring moment by moment.
Right.
And I resonate a lot with what you've said before. You said so many things, but and you wrote this on your books, like we came here to the world like to share our gifts, and each one of us has a specific our own specific gifts that we came here to share, those our own gifts and the value of who we are, like to the world, and when I hear you and I'm while I'm speaking, like my inner flames like start like firing, and I resonate so much. And and this willingness to opening to learning and to be that loving adult, just bringing and taking the daily actions to bring spirit, like and to take these responsibilities of bringing our gifts and sharing our gifts. Like sometimes we go through hard times, like, and I imagine that I've read a little bit about you and I heard, but I imagine that you also went through hard times, and how were you able to stand in your faith, in this loving intention, even in these hard times, to keep on walking and to keep on bringing, no matter what's going like outside, but keep on trusting and keep on walking like the talk of love, like this is what's come up to me right now.
Because it's the only thing that's worked for me. Before inner bonding, I was not a healthy person. I was not a happy person. I don't even know that I had ever experienced joy. I came from quite a bit of abuse as I was growing up, and I was an only child. I was very lonely, and I was in a long marriage that was not happy at all. And I was a caretaker. I was giving myself up, taking care of my husband, taking care of my 3 kids, taking care of my parents, taking care of my clients. Just and you can't do that forever without getting completely drained and ill. And at that time, I was very ill, life-threateningly ill. And so when inner bonding came in, I started to know why. I mean, I was going to doctors. I was eating really well. I've been eating really well for 63 years or something, a long time. And yet I was ill. And so it was when inner bonding came in that I realized that if I didn't start to take care of myself and risk what I was afraid of, because I was afraid, I was terrified that I would lose my marriage, my 30-year marriage, that my kids would be mad, that my parents would be mad. But I knew that I had to stop caretaking them and giving myself up and not making my feelings matter at all. Just everybody else's feelings mattered, but mine didn't. I knew I had to learn how to take responsibility for my own feelings and how to love myself instead of giving myself up and trying to get other people to love me, which is what caretaking is about, trying to get everybody else to give you what you're not giving yourself and what I didn't get from my parents. And so I knew that I had to do that. And I knew it was going to be really, really hard. And it was. I did lose my 30-year marriage. Two of my three kids were really mad at me. My parents disowned me. I mean, everything changed in life. But by learning to take care of myself, by learning to love myself, by learning to tune into my soul. Everybody has such a beautiful soul, and to unearth the gifts that I've been given. We all have gifts in our inner child. We all have gifts in our soul, but if it's hidden away, you can't find them. And you're not going to find them unless you learn to see and value and love your beautiful soul. And you can't see it through your wounded self. You have to see it through your higher guidance. And so as I started practicing inner bonding and I started giving my inner child a voice, and she started being really mad at me, like, I don't count. I'm not important to you. I don't matter. You don't even know I'm here. You're not tuned into me at all. You don't even know what I feel. And I started realizing, wow, that's why I'm so sick. And that's when I started really seriously practicing inner bonding, learning who I am in my soul, uncovering gifts that I didn't know that I had, no longer caretaking everybody in my life, and learning to connect to my guidance. That's what got me through it. And my guidance kept saying, it's going to be okay. It's hard to know it's going to be okay when you're making such a huge change in your life. But for me, it was actually life and death at that point. I knew if I didn't do it, I was going to die. And I was 45 years old at that time. I was not ready to die. And so what happened is, yeah, I lost these people that I thought loved me, which they didn't, because if they would have supported me in loving myself. New people came in who did support me, and I got healthy. I got well, and I got well really fast. It was amazing what happened. Once I started to take loving care of myself, once I learned from my guidance what it means to take responsibility for my own feelings, to make my own feelings matter. Now, it didn't just happen overnight, it's a process. It happened over time. But once I started to practice inner bonding, my inner child got, oh, okay, she's devoted to this. She's going to learn this. I don't have to be so sick to get her attention. And that's when I got well. And so even though it was so hard, I mean, that's when my work blossomed. That's when books blossomed, and even though I lost my marriage and my parents disowned me and my kids were mad, um, it was okay. It was okay because, none of that matters if you don't have yourself. If you don't know how to love yourself, you can have people in your life all over the place. You're not going to feel loved. You're not going to feel that wholeness inside that comes when you're practicing inner bonding, that what I call the inner family, where there's a flow between the higher guidance, the loving adult in the heart, the inner child in the gut, and your feelings, because your inner child mostly communicates through feelings. That's our inner guidance system. That's our soul, communicates with us instantly through feelings. And so we have this inner guidance system with our feelings, and we have this higher guidance system with the soul all around us that's watching over us. And you develop this flow of this inner family. And that's where the resilience is. That's where the the ability to go through hard times is. You have this strong connection that enables you to deal with what life brings you. And, we don't know what life is going to bring us. And we need to be able to learn to deal with whatever life brings us. And so it's my experience with myself and so many tens of thousands of clients that inner bonding creates that resiliency, that ability to stay in your heart, to stay open, stay connected on this flowing level so that we can deal with the challenges in life.
Thank you, Margaret. And while I was listening to you, like this was popping up, like the resistance and the power struggle of the wound itself, like we start going through the process and we start opening to learning and open to this willingness to take responsibility for our feelings and how are we treating ourselves, and this resistance and this inner power struggle comes up. What would you say about this? When specifically when there is no loving adult, when the loving adult, like when we are starting to build this loving adult,
Yeah, so the wounded self doesn't want to give up control. It's all about control. And it thinks that if we develop our loving adult and we start listening to our higher guidance instead of listening to the wounded self, that it's going to die. It's maybe learned about ego death, because that's what the wounded self is, that ego wounded part of us. And so it's scared. It's scared that it's not useful anymore. It's scared that it's just going to disappear. And that's very scary to any part of us. And so what we need to do is recognize that that the wounded self is, first of all, many ages. It can be pre-birth, it can be a toddler, it can be school age, it can be an adolescent, a young adult. It depends on when we absorbed a particular belief and when we developed a particular form of abandoning. Like, when did you learn to judge yourself? Or when did you start to use drugs to numb out your feelings, or food? Or when did you learn to just stay up in your head and completely disconnect from the feelings in your body? Or when did you learn to make other people, to blame others and be a victim and make other people responsible for your feelings? These are major forms of self-abandonment that we learned along the way. And so if you, for example, learned to smoke cigarettes when you were 11, when you're smoking, then that means the 11-year-old wounded self is in charge. And it doesn't want to give this up, because to the wounded self, this is what got you through. This is what kept you alive and sane. This is what worked to not feel so much pain. And many of us have a lot of pain in childhood. So it's very attached to these forms of self-abandonment. For example, I've worked with very successful people who are miserable because they judge themselves all the time. You got to work harder. You got to be perfect. You got to do more. You're not doing enough, blah, blah, blah. And they believe that that's what brought them success. The wounded self believes that. And I know that they're successful in spite of their wounded self, not because of it, and that they'll have even more success if they let go of all that pressure and that judgment. But the wounded self doesn't want to accept that. And so it goes into resistance. It resists practicing inner bonding. It resists opening to learning. And it's not the part of us that does that. It's the loving adult. It's the heart that decides, this is not working for me. I don't want to do this anymore, and decides to open to learning. What happens gradually, and this is what happened for me, what happens with a lot of people gradually, is that as you develop your loving adult and your spiritual connection, you actually start to feel safer, because you realize you're not alone, you're being guided. And different things happen. So many things have happened that either saved my life or all kinds of other things that I got from my guidance, that eventually my wounded self said, okay, you as a loving adult with your guidance are keeping us safer than I can. I can't know what your guidance knows. I can't protect you the way your guidance can. And it starts to let go. And eventually I sort of felt my wounded self kind of crawl up into my heart and say, I'm feeling safer now. And it just made it so much easier to not allow that part of me to take over. I mean, I can't say that it's gone because it's there. It's an instinctual part of us, that fight or flight mechanism. But I've also given my wounded self a new job. It doesn't die. Energy is energy and it doesn't die. And since this part of us is so devoted to control, the job that I've given my wounded self is to control in positive ways, like doing affirmations. Affirmations, can work for some people, but lots of times they don't. They just may be another form of control. Well, that's fine with my wounded self. My wounded self likes to say affirmations. And so I've given her that job. And maybe that's working great. I don't know, but I just don't hear the negativity of the wounded self hardly at all anymore. I just don't hear it. I don't hear judgments. I used to be so addicted to sugar and anger and all kinds of things. Not anymore, because that's all of the wounded self. I don't need to numb out. It's very easy to eat well. I don't want to control people anymore. I did for so many years, but I don't want to do that anymore. And so as you learn to be a loving adult, that wounded self just gets safer and safer and lets go of so many of those forms of self-abandonment. And as you take action based on the truth, not on the lies of the wounded self, the false beliefs get healed. And we have many, we have layers and layers of false beliefs. There's the core shame, false belief of I'm not good enough. I'm not important. I'm not worthy. I don't matter. I shouldn't be here. Everybody's got something like that in their wounded self. But as you learn to be a loving adult and take loving care of yourself, those beliefs heal because now your inner child knows that he or she matters to you because you're taking loving care of yourself. You're taking care of yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, in relationships with organization, like time and space, on many levels. We learn to take care of ourselves. And that makes the inner child feel loved and valued and important. Then he or she knows that they matter to you. Whereas our inner child didn't feel that before. Because when the wounded self's in charge, abandoning us, there's no way that we know that we matter.
Thank you. And it was coming up to me. Sometimes we are raised and we don't have like loving models, and we are creating and we are building this new, like for me you are a role model, but sometimes people don't know, like, and for me it blew my mind when I realized that my loving adult knows nothing, and it's okay. Like my higher guidance is showing me the way and giving me all the answers and truth and next steps moment by moment. So I was kind of wondering, like, what's what comes up to you in this sensation of, like, our guidance is like showing us the way, and in parallel we are here, and sometimes we get caught because we don't have these role models and we don't know how to move on. And how did you learn about this, building a loving model for you, and having the model of your parents, but building your own model? Like, what would you say about that?
Well, the more I practice inner bonding and I got connected with my guidance, the more I could see her as a role model. In fact, when I first started doing inner bonding, I asked my guidance to be the loving adult, to act through me. I mean, I'm spirit can't act. Spirit is spirit. And I'm in a body. I'm the one that has to take loving action. And it's loving action that lets us know that we're important, that we matter, that we're loved. I didn't know the loving action. I had never seen loving action. I had zero role models for loving action. I mean, maybe there's a few here and there in movies, but there just are not very many role models for taking responsibility for our own feelings, taking loving action for our own self. And so at the beginning, I asked my guidance to, I invited my guidance in to do it through me, use my body. It was like taking me and putting me aside and inviting this beautiful, wise, loving being into my being. And I still do that all the time. I invite her in and let her act through me.
Mm.
And that is what has developed my loving adult, is allowing her to just act through me, which I do all the time, all the time. I'm doing that right now. I don't even think about what I'm saying. I just let her speak through me. And I do that whenever I'm going to speak, I say, okay, you're on. And I just kind of step aside and let my guidance come through me.
I remember like you tune into your higher guidance, like, and you see, like, you tuned into the frequency of the higher guidance and just let go.
Right. Yeah, and that's how I write, because writing used to be, when I first started writing, it was horrible. It was so hard for me, and I hated it. But then after inner bonding, then I started saying to my guidance, okay, I don't really like to write, but I bet you're a great writer, and to just let go and let it come through. And so I do that with everything now.
Yeah. I always ask my guidance, like show me the way. Like if you want me to create something, like just sometimes I woke up and I channelize something and I start writing it down, like, okay, let's create this. Or I when I paint or even when I write, I walk through the same process, I integrating the inner bonding process, of course. And
Right.
Margaret, you always like you speak before, like when we are with attuned with our higher guidance, like these words that come in, everything's gonna be okay. Like, and what would you say about like practicing like love and choosing love as a priority? That
That
for me, like my number one priority is like loving myself, like, and being the really creating and developing day by day, moment by moment, a loving adult. Uh, I would like to hear about this from you. That for me, it's like a core subject.
no, I'm not sure. I'm not clear on the question, honey.
Like choosing love as a priority, like
Yeah.
practicing and walking through the journey of love.
Yeah, so I started doing this because when I first started practicing inner bonding, I asked my guidance, why am I here? What's the purpose of being here? And she said, you are here to evolve in your ability to love. Your soul has to evolve in your ability to love and to manifest the gifts you've been given. And I believed her. I knew that that was why I was here. So that's my guiding light: love, kindness, peace, joy. These are my guiding lights. These keep me on track. Nothing else seems more important to me than evolving as a loving human being and then being able to share love. So often in relationships, people think that if only they can get love, if only somebody would love them the way they weren't loved, perhaps as they were growing up, if only somebody, wanted to be their partner and wanted to love them the way they want to be loved, then they would feel whole and complete. But the problem is that, well, first of all, we attract at our common level of self-love or self-abandonment. And so if we're abandoning ourselves, expecting somebody else to love us, they're going to be doing the same thing. They're going to be abandoning themselves and expecting us to love them. And that's a codependent relationship, and it usually doesn't work well. And so too many people go through life thinking that getting love and having control over getting love is what will make them feel good. And they'll feel good for the moment, like any addiction feels good for the moment, but it's not deep and long lasting. But when you make love your highest priority, and starting with learning to love yourself, then you get filled up with love. And then it's overflowing and you want to share it. You want to share it with others. And that's when you're going to attract, if you're not in a relationship, you're going to attract somebody who also wants to share love, who's also on a growth path and learning to do their inner work, learning to be on that path of love. And that's when we create really loving relationships. And I know I work with relationships a lot, and it's so gratifying that, if both people are really coming and open to learning, it's so gratifying to see a relationship that may have been falling apart and then come back together in whole new ways. I just had a session yesterday with a client who, he and his wife came to me, they were separated, and it didn't look like they were going to get back together, but they each were very devoted to doing their inner work. And so they've been back together now just under a year, I think. And he said to me yesterday, he said, I just can't believe how loving we are with each other. We're so in love with each other. And they've been together like 15 years. They're so in love, and they're telling each other all the time how much they love each other. They're supporting each other, in doing whatever they each individually want to do. They have more laughter, more joy, more fun. But that's because they've both been willing to do the work, to take responsibility for their feelings instead of blaming each other, which is what was happening before. And so it's so gratifying to me to see this happening. And this happens with most of the couples that I work with. This happens with them.
Yeah. While I was listening to you, like I remember, like, you're giving away your little girl, and this like inner bonding is about like learning how to love ourselves, and then as from loving ourselves, share our love to others, because we all want to share our love and share others, but not giving away, And it was coming up my first intensive with you that my wounded self was so scared of opening to love and opening to be in a relationship. And I was having this wounded self that was so in alert that, and I remember that you spoke to me about like being open to love and to open to feel the pain as well. And I want to hear it from you again, because many people are so scared of feeling pain that they don't really give themselves the opportunity to really love. And I was living that situation like kind of 4 years ago. So
Yeah. So what people don't realize is that all of our feelings have information for us, that those feelings are coming from the inner child, coming from the soul, and they have vital information for us. So if we're in pain, the pain is either telling, like if we're anxious, depressed, angry, that pain is telling us that we're abandoning ourselves and we need to take a look at how we're treating ourselves. If we have what I call the existential pain or the pain of life, the loneliness, the grief, the heartbreak, helplessness over others, that means that there's something happening externally that we need to pay attention to. Maybe we're with somebody who's closed down or who's narcissistic, and we're feeling it, but we're not paying attention to it. We're feeling the loneliness. We're feeling the heartache of it. And so it's so vital to pay attention to all of our feelings. They have such vital information for us. They can tell us if somebody is safe or dangerous. They can tell us that this situation is not good for us, that we need to move away from it. Our feelings are just such a vital part of learning to take care of ourselves. And so, of course, once you understand that your feelings have all this information for you, even your very painful feelings, it's just like on the physical level. If you touch a hot stove, your hand hurts immediately and you immediately stop doing it. But if you were to numb your hand with Novocaine, you could put your hand on the stove and burn your hand badly and not know it because you wouldn't be feeling it. And that's what happens a lot on the inner level. People numb out, and so they don't feel the messages that their inner guidance system is giving them, so they don't know that they're abandoning themselves until, like I did, like I got sick. Because that's what happens. The inner child finally says, look, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to do something more. I'm going to do something more drastic. And eventually it can be illness. Now, of course, that's not all illness, but for me, that's what it was. And it is for a lot of people. And so, yeah, I mean, it's so important to be present with our pain, to learn from our pain, to learn to manage the painful feelings of life with love, with compassion, with bringing that love in and being present with our feelings and really opening to what they're saying to us. And when we learn to do that, then we stop being afraid of our pain. We stop needing to numb it out. We stop needing to avoid it with all the self-abandoning ways that we have. And you know that now, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Margaret. And I don't know if you're feeling like sharing something else. There's um, I'm launching the program by the end of October. It's a 7 weeks program, and we are gonna go through the intention of loving or intention of getting protecting ourselves, and also going through all the different parts, and then going through the inner bonding process to feel it and experience it.
Yeah, that's
So.
great. That's great. I'm so happy you're doing that.
So I really want to thank you for your time, for being here, for everything, for sharing all your wisdom. Like, it always raises my frequency when I hear to you, no matter so many times, or even if I read something that I already read, like always new pieces for me come in and integrate. So, and thank you and Erica for creating together this method that really changes my life. Like, what I do feel is that I feel the freedom and the joy and the love that keeps on expanding, and the new opportunities to be who I am every time I stand on my truth and on choosing to open my heart.
Right. That's great. I'm so proud of you, honey. You've done such good work. I'm so proud of you.
And it never ends for me. It's day by day. So thank you very much. And I see you in 2 weeks in your intensive that I'm gonna be there with you.
Great. That's
Assisting
great.
you.
Yeah, the intensive is awful.
Yeah.
Great.
So
Okay, honey. I'll see you then.
thank you very much, Margaret.
Yeah, you're welcome, honey. Take care.